speaker is the wonderful Karma Neal. She is a PhD and is the principal for Neal Firms, which provides consulting and mediation services. She has 15 years of experience in family and rural development finance, most recently as the administrator of the USDA Rural Business Cooperative Service, an agency of the Rural Development Mission Area to which she was appointed by President Biden. In that role, she led the national multi-billion-dollar agency supporting rural business and cooperative development and oversaw agency implementation of the ARPA, or the American Rescue Plan Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, Build America Buy America Act, the Farm Bill, and other priorities. She earned a BA in biology at Swarthmore College and later a doctorate in genetics from Emory University, a master's in bioethics from a university in Chicago. She completed an executive education in impacting investing at the University of Oxford. And we are so excited for Ms. Karma to join us, and I'm going to turn it over to her at this point in time and let her share her screen and educate us all today.
Thank you so much, Harley, and thanks so much to the NAVS team for the invitation. Thanks to you all for being here. I'm really, really thrilled to be able to share some of what I learned and what I've seen when I served as administrator of the Rural Business Cooperative Service. When you have that kind of a position, you get to see where the dollars go, and you also get to see where the dollars don't go. And I was particularly pleased that Janie Sims Hip asked me to talk about guaranteed loans because that's a place where I see significant opportunity, and hope that some of you, if you are already taking advantage of it, you'll share that with others so that others can take advantage of it. And if you're not, maybe consider and see how guaranteed loans at USDA might be helpful to you. Of course, we'll also talk about agriculture and energy and some of the programs that are at the Rural Business Cooperative Service to support that work. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me just one moment. And everyone should be seeing that now. I trust that you do. And so you've heard the introduction already. So I'm going to move down to talk about your role at your institution. If you could just share in the chat, again, I know folks have put in their name and their actual institution, but if you might share your role, that'll be helpful. It'll be nice to see sort of what the variety is, and it'll help me sort of tailor some of the kinds of information that I might be able to share with you all today. And so I'm pulling up the chat to see if there's anyone who's putting stuff in. I see some organizations that I recognize, so it's really great to see names that are familiar, people and organizations as well. So if there are others, I know when in the registration, it sounds like there were folks who were, okay, we see an ag director, fantastic. There may be some loan officers, excellent. Consumer and commercial lending, excellent. These are the kind of things, I mean, this is, yeah, loan officers, this is fantastic. And these are exactly the folks that you need on board. When you think about loan officers, thinking about what are your tools, what are the kinds of things you have at your disposal to use to make a deal happen. And hopefully I can give you some options for that. And, for folks who might not be doing the lending directly, but knowing what these resources are for your prospective borrowers, right, or your customers or clients in other ways. There will be a few grant opportunities in here and some loan opportunities as well. And sometimes it'll be important for folks to be able to share with your customers and clients the work that you're doing. Yeah, Flower Hill was one of the ones I first recognized, like, I know you guys. So yeah, really pleased about the work that y'all have done with meat and poultry processors. I'll mention actually that a little bit later on. So thank you all for that. So moving on. Oh, okay, here we go. So I'd always like to start with the strategic plan. Just after I came on at USDA, just a little while after that, the FY22 through FY26 strategic plan was released. And it's a long document. It talks a lot about the priorities, the work that the department is doing. I share this, and you can see the link at the bottom of the page. I share this for two reasons. One, because it's important to know what your government is doing, right? What are they saying they want to do? And I also share it because it allows us to hold folks accountable, right? And I said this when I was at USDA, I say it now. It's important to hold folks accountable. So in the strategic goals sections, there's 6 of those that are identified in the strategic plan. The 5th one is the one that was so really relevant to the work that I was doing under rural development, and I expect maybe really relevant to many of you all as well. It talks about the goal of expanding opportunities for economic development and improving the quality of life in rural and tribal communities, and making sure that rural and tribal communities benefit from historic investments in broadband, clean water, clean and renewable energy infrastructure, all these kinds of things that foster new jobs and new market opportunities, right? And so this is the kind of thing we want to talk about today as we go forward. So I think it's important. It's not just that we're doing this. This is part of the plan. This is the goal. I share this org chart for a couple reasons. It helps you kind of situate where the work is that we're doing is and how that sits within the larger department. As I said, I've served with the Rural Business Cooperative Service. That's part of the Rural Development Mission Area. And that is just one of several mission areas at USDA. So you can see, several of them listed here. I understand there was a seminar maybe a week or two ago from Farm Service Agency that NAFS hosted. And you can see Farm Service Agency over on the left-hand side. I say this, and I put this up here to sort of illustrate just how large and complex USDA is. And also to just note that what I'm going to share here is not comprehensive. It can't be. There is so much going on at the Department of Agriculture. There's also a ton going on at rural development and even at the Rural Business Cooperative Service. So this is not meant to be comprehensive. It is meant to share the things that I think will be most relevant to you all on the call, and to give you the information and tools that you need to make sure that if you want to learn more, you're intrigued, you're like, well, I learned about this, but what about these other programs? You know exactly where to go to get that information. So in the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about rural development. So I said the rural development mission area is comprised of 3 agencies. There's the Rural Utility Service, the Rural Housing Service, the Rural Business Cooperative Service. Together, I think this slide is actually a little bit out of date. It's probably more than 60 now programs, because there's been so much new investment and new programs started. So there are lots of programs. These are technical programs, financing programs, certification programs, just a variety of those kinds of things that support rural communities with loan and grant investments of more than $50 billion annually. Again, I think that dollar number is larger even now because of the number of investments that have happened in this administration. I mentioned the 3 agencies, and I'll share a little bit about the first 2, much more on the third one, since that's the one I'm most familiar with and where I served and where I think it will be really relevant for many of you. The Rural Utility Service provides infrastructure, supports infrastructure improvements for rural communities. Things like energy production, electricity, water, broadband, all those things fall under the Rural Utility Service. Rural Housing Service supports housing, as is obvious by the name, both single-family housing and multifamily housing, and also essential community facilities, healthcare, education, childcare, other kinds of publicly owned utilities, a number of programs there. And then the Rural Business Cooperative Service supports rural businesses and entrepreneurs, as is, again, probably obvious from the name, cooperatives as well, helping those businesses start, grow, thrive, endure shocks. We also do a lot of work around local food systems and clean energy development. I think this is a place where there's sometimes some misunderstanding. Folks, I used to, as I came on, I would talk to folks sometimes and they would say, oh, you're at Rural Business Cooperatives, Rural Development at USDA. That must mean you only do agricultural businesses. Like, no, we don't only do agricultural businesses. We do a broad range of things. And sometimes you meet folks and they say, oh, you do everything except agriculture. It's like, no, we do. It's a broad mix. I'll talk about that. You'll see some of that as we go through and talk through some of the programs. There's quite a bit of work that we do in ag. And it's part of the recognition is that many of the agricultural related businesses are businesses, right? And we're the Rural Business Cooperative Service. And so we want to be positioned, that organization, you see, I'll switch back to we from before, but that agency, of course, wants to be well positioned to be able to serve folks regardless of what their businesses are in rural areas. So I highlight this slide because I think it's important. You don't necessarily need to look at the details, although they are interesting. The key thing is that when you look at the rate of entrepreneurship, it is higher in rural areas than it is in metropolitan urban areas, right? And so that is a really key point. It doesn't mean there may not be as many if the population isn't as high, but the rate of entrepreneurship is high. And from this same paper from the Federal Reserve Banks, It talks about the importance of long-term investments, access to capital, which of course you all are in the business of doing, and how important that is for those rural communities, rural businesses, and to allow them to help advance their economies, provide jobs, the kinds of things that makes communities healthy. So let me pause again and just ask in the chat, and I actually figured out how I can see the chat as I'm speaking here, even though I'm sharing my screen. And so if you would share what sectors you lend in, again, it'll help me kind of highlight some opportunities potentially in some of the programs that I'll be highlighting today. Anyone want to share you're in manufacturing? Are you in, do you agricultural lending? Do you do lending across the food supply chain? Any thoughts that folks want to share there? If not, that's okay too. We'll education. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, there may be some community facility stuff that'll be relevant for you there. Okay, well, we'll pause if those things come up or folks want to share business sectors. Okay, excellent. Areas mostly rural. Glad to hear that, and there'll be a lot of things that'll be of interest, I expect. So thank you guys for sharing that. And again, as we go through, if you all think of things, feel free to put items in the chat and we'll look at them. So this initial request was made to talk about guaranteed loans. So let's start there. So with guaranteed loans, at rural development in general, the borrower is going to work through their lender to access these loans. I think that's a really important thing. Sometimes you'll find that potential borrowers, business owners will come directly to USDA and say, I'm interested in this guaranteed loan. Well, I'm glad you're interested in it. We're pleased about that. They're going to be pleased about that, but you're going to work through the borrower is going to work through their lender for that. Lenders can include, for rural development loans, can include banks, credit unions, loan funds, including CDFIs. Again, sometimes there's a misunderstanding that maybe it's only banks that can participate or that loan funds can't participate, and that's not the case at all. Any of these lenders can. And guarantees, these loan guarantees serve to reduce the risk to the lender, since a third party, in this case, the full faith and credit of the United States government, agrees to pay a portion of the loan if the borrower defaults. And obviously, no one's trying to make a bad loan, right? That's not the point of lending, right? But we also know that things happen, right? Sometimes things completely out of our control, like pandemics or natural disasters or those kinds of things. And when those kinds of things happen, it is helpful to have a situation when there is a guarantee that can reduce that risk to the borrower. So let's talk now about some of these programs. And okay, well, I'll first ask, does anybody have folks either, I can't actually probably see you if you raise your hand, so maybe if you put in the chat, if you've used guaranteed loans before, either ones at rural development or maybe FSA or even SBA, other kinds of loans. Anybody use guaranteed loans before? Okay, BIA guarantee. Yep. Okay. Well, I think that you understand, and probably just generally being in banking, you understand how a guarantee works. And so I think the key in all of these is to understand how they apply in different programs and different situations. We'll talk a little bit about that today, and then we'll make sure that you have the information that you need to be able to move forward, should you be interested in these. So I want to start with talking about 1RD. 1RD is a program relatively new in the last, I think, 10 years or so, that is a standard policy for 4 different loan programs, guaranteed loan programs at rural development at the Department of Agriculture. These include the Water and Waste Disposal Guaranteed Loan Program through the Rural Utilities Service, the Community Facilities Loan Program at the Rural Housing Service, and then 2 at Rural Business Cooperative Service, the Business and Industry Guaranteed Loan Program, and the Rural Energy for America Guaranteed Loan Program. This website is a really critical one. It includes application information, lender guides, program information, contact information, really everything you need to know to get started and to continue in good stead with any of those 4 programs that I just mentioned. I've talked about, you'll see websites on most of these slides, because I'm a scientist by training, so I was always taught you need to document your work and cite everything appropriately. So always include those kinds of things. Know that your organizers, NAFS, will be sharing this document with you, so you'll have that. Don't feel like you have to write down every website on these at all. So, but the 1RD is a really great place, because once you become a lender through 1RD, you can then loan through any of those 4 programs, and so that makes it very handy. You're not trying to figure out a different sort of application process for each program. Once you're in with 1RD, you can loan in any of these programs. So let's start with some of the programs. I mentioned there were 4. We'll start off with the Community Facilities Guaranteed Loan. This, of course, is through the Rural Housing Service. And as we talked about, it's to develop rural public facilities. These are facilities that are operated on a nonprofit basis. You see here the eligible beneficiaries, public bodies, Indian tribes on federal or state reservations, federally recognized tribes, and nonprofit organizations. So, and this can vary really, really widely. Healthcare, clinics, public safety, parks, transportation, just a variety of different kinds of things that you'll see, education, you'll see various types of schools and those kinds of things that can be funded through this community facilities program. The due dates are rolling on all of these applications. So it's just, when the project becomes ready, that's when you want to sort of reach out to folks for support on trying to get a guarantee if that's what you're interested in. And these loans can range up to $100 million, and you'll get an 80% guarantee on that loan. So, if you I'll use the max amount here, right? If you had a $100 million loan and, heaven forbid it defaulted on the first day, it certainly wouldn't we expect, but if it did, 80% of that, of course, would be covered. So that'd be $80 million. Typically, obviously, most of these guaranteed loan programs don't have that kind of default rate. In some cases, default rate is almost almost nil. And so we'll see an example of that in just a moment. And typically what happens is if there is something where there is an issue with the loan, obviously there are a number of things that, servicing would go through at your lender to make sure to address all those issues. Then if the guarantee really does come up, at that point, it's usually significantly less than what the original loan amount is. And again, 80% of that amount is what would be covered. Moving on to water and waste. This is a program, guaranteed loan program through the Rural Utility Service. And again, we're thinking here about drinking water, sanitary, sewers, stormwater disposal, all those kinds of things related to water disposal, to water issues, waste and water. Similar kinds of eligible beneficiaries, also rolling deadlines, 80% guarantee in FY24, FY25, it's already been announced this will be a 90% guarantee. So an frankly, even better deal, even less risk to the borrower for loans coming in FY25. And so just as an example for water and waste, there was a $2.2 million award made to a water waste system in the city of Cotter and city of Gassville in Arkansas. That's my home state. And this was to make improvements in their jointly owned water system to address health and sanitary standards. I will say, I grew up in Arkansas and I've lived here and I've actually never heard of these two towns, which is always kind of takes me by surprise. My point saying is that these are small towns, right? These are really small places, and they're able to get this kind of loan through their lender and through the U.S. government to make these improvements that are going to be really relevant to the people who live there. So that's an example of how something like this program can be used. I should have mentioned when I talked about community facilities, also emergency services is an option as well there. As an example, there was a $2 million community facilities award that was made in Forest County, Wisconsin, to build a new emergency services station. So this building is going to house 6 ambulances and enable first responders to provide improved services to 6 townships in the Forest County Potawatomi Reservation. And so again, rural communities, places where you can access these dollars to make really meaningful improvements for the communities. So let's turn now to the business and industry guaranteed loan program. This is really a workhorse program for businesses, not just small businesses. I had to stop myself there, but businesses, rural businesses, pretty much writ large. You can use it for a number of things, for land purchases and development, building development, inventory, equipment, supplies, just a real wide variety of purposes. Going for rural, for-profit, nonprofit businesses, cooperatives, federally recognized tribes, public bodies, again, a wide variety of entities that are eligible here. And I said rural at first, but there's actually a carve out in BNI. So if it's a local food systems business, it can also be an urban business. And so we see a lot of use of BNI in that way as well. So there's some flexibility with regard to local food systems. Rolling applications, similarly, 80% guarantee, loans up to $25 million. For certain cooperatives, it can go up to $40 million. And, one of the things I'll say, like these are pretty big loans, and we're a ton of people who raise their hands or put something in the chat. We said, have you used these guaranteed loans before? Don't let that number scare you, right? So just because the max is 25 million doesn't mean you have to make a $25 million loan. If that's something that's out of your range right now, that's okay. The average loan for the BNI is about $6 million. We definitely see loans of significantly less, $1 million less, much less than that. And this can be, because of the guarantee, this can be a good way for a lender to sort of stick their foot in the water on some of these larger loans, right? Because you would have that protection of that guarantee if something were to happen in terms of the repayment. So I'll turn now to the and I should say, just a huge, as I think about BNI, just to give some examples of how this is used. I've seen it used for a lumber mill in Arkansas, a pallet company in Mississippi, a sports complex in Colorado, hotels, assisted living, just a real wide variety of businesses writ large. So as I said, kind of, like I said, a bit of a workhorse. You could do a lot of different things with the BNI program. Turning now to the fourth of the four programs that are under 1RD. This is the Rural Energy for America program. This is the one I sort of alluded to earlier when I said that it has done well in terms of its defaults, and in fact this one has a negative subsidy rate right now. So it's small, but it means that there's a little bit of money that's made that allows the government to cover some costs through this loan. So this is through this program. So basically what that means is there's almost unlimited dollars available for this program. We'll see some examples, see what that means in terms of how these dollars are tracked in just a moment. This program is also really, really powerful and can be used in a number of ways. So this is for agricultural producers and for rural small businesses. And I think it's important to think about both of those. So for both of those kinds of categories, you can use it for renewable energy or for energy efficiency improvements. So let's talk about what those mean just a second. So energy efficiency improvements, and I'll show a chart in just a second. You're looking at things where you have let's say an existing business, and you want to make some improvements in equipment. The equipment's going to be more energy efficient. That's something that could be relevant for REAP, right? If you're an agricultural producer and you want to have renewable energy on your farm, that's something that REAP can do. I had the pleasure of visiting a farm in Southern Illinois when I was serving as administrator. It was a hog farm, and they were paying about $3,500 a month for their electricity bill to keep the hogs warm in the wintertime and cool in the summertime. They were able to get a REAP loan and use that to finance solar panels that they put on an unused portion of their property, previously unused portion of their property. Now I almost would say put in the chat what your guess is for what their bill is now. If somebody wants to do that, you should feel free to. It significantly reduces. I'm pausing in case somebody wants to guess on that, but it significantly reduced their bill. In fact, their bill now is only $25, and I think it's 47 cents. I forget the exact change amount, but it's very small. And that was really just to cover the cost of the meter reader to come out and drive out to that farm and read the meter. That was really just paying for his gas and wear and tear on the company car to read the meter. It made a significant difference. And so when we think about farms and rural businesses that are trying to make ends meet, trying to make sure that their bottom line is going to allow them to continue to stay in business, maybe even expand and grow and hire and do the things that businesses want to do, that kind of savings is a significant economic impact. And so really want to make sure that folks know about this program and use that program. With regard to agricultural producers, there's a third option. So we talked about energy efficiency improvements, and I also want to say something about, for agricultural producers, energy efficient equipment. So agricultural producers, not real small businesses, but agricultural producers also have the option of using REAP loans to buy energy efficient equipment as a first off purchase, right? Not necessarily trying to make an improvement, but as a first off purchase. And so we'll see, for example, like grain, a farmer might buy a grain dryer, a new grain dryer that's going to be particularly energy efficient, help them dry that grain in a uniform and consistent manner for sale. This is, again, a really important program. We've seen it used in a number of ways. I mentioned folks saving money. You also see a lot of interest in this program for businesses that are in areas where the electrical grid is not particularly strong. And so they want to make sure that they have access to the energy and electricity regardless of what else is going on. And so renewable energy might be a good tool for them. I saw that in Puerto Rico a lot, where you see folks using REAP loans, and there's also a REAP grant program, which I'll say in just a second, that would allow them to get off the grid. So they could have, even if there were storms, other kinds of things, they didn't have that kind of electrical disruption. Also with rural small businesses, thinking really broadly about what that means. You know, if the business is going to get new windows and the windows are going to be more energy efficient, that could be a REAP loan, right? If the energy, if the, if the company is going to buy new refrigerators because they're storing food, some sort of foodstuffs or food production, something like that. Those new refrigerators or freezers, if they're going to be energy, even if they're replacing old ones, they're likely going to be more energy efficient, right? And so that means it would likely qualify for that. Let me see. I think I see a question come in or a comment. Yeah, thank you. The example of Hall Farm was really dramatic to see. And this farmer, as you can imagine, was very excited about what that meant for his bottom line. That's exactly right. And so, so again, loans of up to $25 million, up to 75% of total eligible project costs, and again, an 80% guarantee. We saw a lot where folks would stack these loans. So you might have a very large project, and some of the costs can be attributed to the Rural Energy for America program, and some of the costs were a little bit more generic, and they use the BNI loan for that. And so you'd see people stack these loans as well. So know that that's an option if there's a bigger project that you want to take advantage of. So I mentioned in REAP loans, also the REAP program also has a grant component. And I mentioned this again, recognizing that the grant wouldn't go to you all as lenders. But again, if you're working with a borrower, and let's say you're doing some other loan, even if you're not doing this a guaranteed loan, if that borrower is in a position to get a REAP grant, that's going to make that borrower probably a better candidate, right? It's going to make their financials look better because they're getting a grant to cover certain expenses that are related to their business. So similar kinds of uses, again, for agricultural producers and rural small businesses. This is a grant program, so there are quarterly deadlines. This program got a significant boost, almost a little over $2 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act, and those dollars are going out now. And so this is a really good program for that. I wanted to just give some examples of what this looks like. Again, particularly on the energy efficiency side, sometimes it's not you can think really broadly about how this could be used. So you have examples, as I said, doors, windows, insulation, switching to type of motor in a piece of equipment, replacing equipment, all those kinds of things can be used in the context for energy efficiency improvements. Will CDFIs be able to use the 80% guarantee for REAP? Yeah, so I mean, CDFIs use these programs. Absolutely. CDFIs are eligible borrowers through 1RD, and so they absolutely can use the program for eligible projects. Absolutely. And I'm not sure if there was I wanted to make sure I understood if the person needs to raise their hand and ask, that's certainly fine too. What the connection was to the EPA equity piece. Is there? Yeah, go ahead and speak if you'd like, Relina.
Oh, yeah, I just had a question because the funds will flow by the end of the year is my understanding. But because we're getting it as equity, there hasn't been a lot of parameters yet on the profile of the borrower. So
got it.
Would we be able to utilize REAP's profile for their 80% guarantee on the loans that we'll be using or extending credit to borrowers with the EPA capital?
Yeah, so I think, thanks for certainly know about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. I think that would be a conversation to have with them in terms of, to your point, like who are the eligible borrowers? And if the eligible borrowers include agricultural producers and rural small businesses, right, which are the two categories of small businesses for REAP, then my expectation is it probably could be used there. And that would be a great way to really leverage those funds. Yeah, absolutely. And also on the renewable energy systems, I gave a solar example before. Solar's common, people know what it is. And so, that's a good sort of starting place. But as you can see, really wide range of tools that can be used in terms of renewable energy systems. So, biomass, geothermal, hydropower, wind, ocean, just a very wide range of things that can be used there. So really encourage you to think creatively. And, as you talk with your potential borrowers, think about this program and what pieces might be a good fit for REAP. So I'll share here a bit about the fees. As I said, I think I may have mentioned this, but the fees get determined every year. The FY24 fees are what I have listed here. The FY25 fees have also been announced, and in the resource guide that you'll get after this webinar, it has a link to the FY25 fees as well. Just a few wanted to highlight here, so you know what you're looking at. So there's a fee to issue the guarantee in the first place, right? And so you can see for BNI, for example, that's 1%, 1 or 1.25% for the other programs. And I'll talk about these other two BIs in just a second. There's a guarantee retention fee. That's an annual fee that just keeps the guarantee going to pay for that service. And so again, you can see the rates for that guarantee percentage, that the guarantee retention fee in each case for each program. You can see here also the percent guarantee, and it's been 80% for all the ones I've talked about. Again, we'll talk about the two BNIs in just a second here. And then in the case where if it's a project where construction is happening, there is an additional fee to issue the guarantee before construction even starts. So sometimes you'll see a very strategic decision for the lender based on, do I want the guarantee before construction or do I want the guarantee after construction? If you do the guarantee before construction, there is an additional 0.5% fee for that. So pretty reasonable for the service that you're getting for the 80% guarantee, at least 80% guarantee that one would get. Let me mention as well, I talked about BNI. There again, carve-outs for BNI for some other uses. So if the project is happening in a socially vulnerable community, you can go to the website and see where those are. Then you can see there's a reduced guarantee issuance fee from 3% to 1%, and a reduced guarantee retention fee from 0.55% to 0.5%. Similarly, if the BNI loan is in a roadless area of Alaska, then again, you also see those same reductions, and you see a 90% guarantee as opposed to an 80% guarantee for the other programs. So again, this information is available. It's announced every year so that folks know and can plan and can think about how they want to use this program. So the OneRD website also has a table that is very helpful to lenders that talks about how much money is available, how much has been allocated for the year, how many of those funds have been actually obligated so far in the second column, the remaining balance in that program, and the total requests that are still pending in that program. So I'll take you through a couple of examples. If you look at BNI, for example, so $1.8 billion allowed for that program this year. As of July 10th, $313 million remaining and $1.1 billion in requests. So BNI is one of those programs, as I said, it's a bit of a workhorse. It's very popular. And unfortunately, it runs out of money, or at least all 3 years when I was there, we'd always run out of money because it is so popular. This table, though, allows you to see, you can go to that OneRD website, see what's available and decide, like, is this something I want to do? Right now, is the money available for? Because it is on a rolling basis, sort of first come, first serve in that regard. At least it has been. Again, there'll be notices if there's something like that changes each year. With REAP, you can see here, again, the amount that was allocated is a little over $1 billion, 329 million obligated to date, so quite a bit remaining. But as I said, REAP has a small negative subsidy rate. And so this $1.05 billion is in some ways a bit of a placeholder, right? Because there's some flexibility there if the remaining funds were not sufficient to meet the need. So it's helpful to see that rolling numbers. You can kind of make decisions around where you want to be. It may be that you say, okay, right now I'm not going to try to get a BNI loan because there's so many folks behind me. I'm going to look and see what happens in FY25 and see where the reset is, if there's more money available, that kind of thing. All right, so that's OneRD. So I want to turn to a couple other guaranteed loan programs briefly, and then we'll talk about some other programs that I think might be interested, both other lending programs and some other programs, again, that may be of use to your borrowers. This is a guaranteed loan program. It's huge. It's huge in terms of the dollar amount, small in terms of the number of people who use it, but I mention it just really for completeness sake in the case of the Rural Business Cooperative Service. This is the Biorefinery Renewable Chemical and Bio-Based Product Manufacturing Assistance Program. It's a really big name, and so everybody just calls it 9003 after the section of the Farm Bill where it is described. These are usually highly significant projects. One I can think of, for example, was related to bio-based aviation fuel. And so they were developing a technology for making this this bio-based aviation fuel, and they had a significant loan. You can see these loans go up to $250 million. Because these loans are so big, the guarantee rate varies depending on the loan and the particular project. And so that rate is determined. It could be 70%, it could be 60%, it could be up to 80% of the total project cost. Variety of organizations of types of eligible beneficiaries, and of course eligible lenders. The eligible lenders, because of the size of the loan, have to meet the well-capitalized definition of so that there is there's some additional security there. And then many of you maybe, of course, expect probably familiar with SBA guaranteed loans. Very common. Lots of folks use those. I'll mention, sometimes folks will say, like, you work at Rural Business Cooperative Service when you were there. Why do you need that when you have SBA, right? Aren't they supposed to cover everything? I don't think it'll come as a surprise that, just because you have an agency doesn't mean that they're giving that the benefits of that agency are extended to everyone equally. And rural communities have often been left behind. And so that is the reason for the Rural Business Cooperative Service. Part of what we see as well, though, is that there is in some ways a complementary nature, right? The SBA guaranteed loans, the largest ones go up to $5 million, whereas some of ours can go significantly higher than that, $25 million, $40 million. You can stack the loans, that kind of thing. And so they complement each other in some ways, but it's good to know what your options are as you're looking at how to decrease your risk as you're lending. So as I turn, that's the last I'll say about the guaranteed loans, pending any questions that you all may have. So we'll turn now to some other programs at Rural Development. And so again, curious if folks are willing to share if they've used other programs at Rural Development. I know when I came on, I served at a CDFI for 12 years before coming to USDA Rural Development. And we had used a number of programs there, some of the community facilities dollars, the IRP program, intermediary relending program, RBIG and RBOG, and just a number of those kinds of programs. That program is now changed to RBDG. But there were a number of those kinds of programs that we used. And I thought I knew a bunch of them. And then I found out there were so many more. So if you've not used those, and we will, some of those are really popular. IRP, yep, all of those, excellent. And so I'm going to share some others with you that may be of interest as well. So we'll move forward. So first is the Healthy Food Financing Initiative. As CDFIs, you all may be familiar with the Health HFFI program that comes out of the CDFI fund. This has the same name, which is extremely confusing, but it's a different program. And so this is HFFI at USDA. And it is focused, as the name suggests, on improving access to healthy food and expanding economic opportunity in underserved areas. This program got a significant boost through the American Rescue Plan Act, and so there are quite a bit of dollars, and many of those are being announced still now. You can see this Food Access Retail Expansion Fund that was just announced earlier this month, and I think the RFA comes out, as you see here, in August. That's a program for the actual food businesses to get loans. So they would work directly with the HFFI program on that. But again, this is a place where if they're going to get, a grant, for example, or technical assistance through the FAIR Fund, then that might help the part of the lending that you're doing on some other aspect of their business. So I think it's an important tool to know. A couple things I'll highlight. There's quite a bit of information on the website, and so definitely encourage folks to go there. In addition to the dollars for the programs, loans and grants for the programs, there's also technical assistance available. And again, you may have borrowers who, are working with you on a loan, but also could use technical assistance through this program. And so maybe there's an opportunity there to support your borrowers and make that deal a stronger deal for you. I also want to highlight that while this funding does come, the full amount of funding comes from USDA, from the federal government for this program. It's actually run through the Reinvestment Fund, a CDFI, some of you may know them, based in Philadelphia, that has worked on the food sector for quite some time. And so the website, investinginfood.com, is a website that they manage on behalf, and they manage the program on behalf of USDA. So I wanted to highlight that because sometimes folks look at that and say, well, that's a .com, not a .gov website, and maybe are a little concerned about that. But that is a very intentional design. And again, it's the CDFI that's running that, doing an excellent job of that work. So HFFI, something to think about. We heard earlier folks talking about from Flower Hill talking about the meat and poultry processing support that they've been offering, which I know was hugely appreciated. I want to highlight the meat and poultry intermediary lending program. This program is done, and so you may ask, why are you highlighting a program that's over? It is over, and there were a total of 34 awards totaling $275 million. Nonprofit lenders were able to apply for and receive these awards up to $15 million in grant funds that they would use to establish a revolving loan fund. The first loan that they made out of that revolving loan fund would have to be to a meat and poultry processor, some sort of meat processing entity. Then as those dollars are paid back ideally, and that those dollars revolve, then those dollars can be reloaned out anywhere in the middle of the food supply chain. So we're not talking about growing, we're not talking about selling, but anything in the middle. So, distribution, storage, warehousing, transportation, all those kinds of things, processing, any of those kinds of things that happen in the middle of the food supply chain. Once these dollars are revolved, they can go back out in that way. We're very intentional when writing the program guidelines for this, that to facilitate participation with other lenders, those kinds of things. So I mention this because the website that you see listed there has a list of all of the awards. I just highlighted some selected ones so you can kind of see the geographic breadth and the types of lenders that have these awards. But I highlight those because it may be that at some point, you have a project that's in one of these places in the service area for one of these organizations, and you want to participate. You want to think about how you could maybe access some of those dollars. These entities, they're going to have, ideally, if all their loans get paid back as agreed, they will have their grant money in that revolving loan fund forever, right? I mean, to some extent. And so they'll be looking for opportunities to loan that out, perhaps in participation with some of your organizations. So that's why I wanted to highlight this, because although the funding from USDA has already gone out, these entities are going to be making these loans ideally for many, many years to come. That was intentional with the design, right? To make sure that there would be dollars in the food supply chain circulating. There would be people who know how to lend, who are excited to lend within the food supply chain for a long time going forward. And so that's part of the goal there. So the Rural Economic Development Loan and Grant Program, this is one, again, just want to highlight, this operates through rural electric cooperatives. And so there may be, sometimes when we see how this program works, we see lenders partnering with the rural electric cooperatives because the electric cooperatives aren't lenders, right? And so they sometimes need assistance to do that, but it can be a really good program to provide dollars for a variety of different types of projects. You can see the purposes indicated there, all kinds of options there. And where you often see this used is sort of as gap financing. Maybe there's been a loan for some amount, and then you go and get what you call red leg, Rural Economic Development Loan and Grant. Go and get a red leg award to sort of finish off the capital stack. And so you definitely see a lot of folks will use that program in this way. This program is used a lot in certain areas. It's like they figured it out, and very, very little in most other areas. And so I think it's an opportunity to at least know about in case it's something that might be a fit for a project that you're considering. IRP, folks, I know there was somebody who wrote in the chat that they've used this program. It's a bit of a workhorse program too in some ways. It provides long-term low interest loans to intermediaries, nonprofit intermediaries like you all, like CFIs, that they then can relend to rural small businesses that to ideally create jobs and improve economic conditions in rural communities. So, it's been around for a long time. Wide variety of nonprofit and cooperative eligible applicants, wide variety of potential ultimate beneficiaries or borrowers that can access these funds. Award types up to $1 million at 1% interest over 30 years. So, fairly inexpensive money. And the loans can go up to $400,000 typically to a borrower. So again, something that is, if you're thinking about capital needs for your loan fund, the IRP program may be a good option. So now I want to talk as sort of final, I want to talk about some resources and tools that are out there to help you kind of navigate these programs, see what some options may be, that kind of thing. So the Rural Partners Network was initiated through rural development at USDA, but it's an all-of-government program that helps rural communities find resources around creating jobs, infrastructure, economic stability, those kinds of things. Almost 24 federal departments, their rural person, their rural desk officer at HUD, the rural desk officer at SBA, the rural folks at all these agencies have come together to form the Rural Partners Network. Some really useful tools in there. I definitely encourage folks to look at, and the website is great. It's rural.gov, so right, easy to remember, easy to find, rural.gov. The program, there's a searchable guide for almost 70 programs, again, all across the federal government. And so there may be some useful tools there. And again, I think as lenders, it's helpful to think about, what are those programs that are helpful to me directly as a lender? It's helpful to think about what are those programs that are helpful to me as a lender as I'm making the loan. So that would be like some of these guaranteed loan programs, right? And then I think it's also helpful to think about what are the programs that are helpful to my borrower because they help make my loan stronger, right? They help make my borrower a stronger customer. And so I would have those lenses on, those hats on as you're looking at these programs. There's also a very helpful 148 page, so it's a bear to print. I don't necessarily suggest printing it, but definitely keep it handy. Clean energy guide from the White House that talks about all the kinds of energy programs that are available. So definitely encourage folks to take a look at that as you think about agriculture and energy and what some of the options are, not just at USDA, but in this case, again, across the federal government. Rural Development has published a number of resource guides that, again, I think are very handy. I think part of the reason that makes these particularly useful is that they don't take the lens of, the Farm Bill, for example, right? They're not organized based on how the Farm Bill is organized or those kinds of things. They're organized based on what people need to do, right? So if you're interested in rural entrepreneurship, pull down the Rural Entrepreneurship Guide, right? If you're interested in childcare, pull down the childcare guide, right? And so it's going to pull together a number of different programs that are related to the particular topic area, regardless of where they sit. And so I think some of these, I've highlighted some of the ones that I think might be particularly interesting and useful to this group. But of course, there are a number of others that are available as well. And definitely encourage you to, review them, the ones that you like, pull them down, keep your copy on your drive, so you have that and can share that and use that as you'd like to do. Some of these, I'll highlight just a couple of these, are done jointly with other agencies. So the planning guide for communities is done jointly with the Economic Development Agency. This rural electric vehicle charging station guide is done cooperatively with the Department of Transportation. There's one on childcare that I guess I didn't write here, but there's one on childcare that was done with DHHS. So try to think again across government. So as individuals, as public sector, you don't have to go and try to figure out, does this program live at this agency or this department? You can go to this guide and find all the things that you need. I'm seeing someone's question. Oh, it's down. Okay, thank you so much. I'll see if I can find out what that is. I would not expect that to be down at this stage, so we'll see what it is. Thank you for that heads up. Next, I want to highlight the tools that are available for looking at investments. So sometimes it can be helpful to see where dollars are going. And there's some very nice guides. Again, I'll show you as you go through there. But the Rural Data Gateway can show you where the dollars are going. And so just as a quick look, I looked at investments from rural development by state. And so you can see Iowa, in terms of number of investments, is by far leading the pack at 2,003 investments between 2012 and 2024. This is over this period of time. You can change, of course, the years and that kind of thing and see what the changes are. So you can see some places having as few as 51 over that 12-year period. So it can vary significantly. I think it says something about, it can show you where there is opportunity to really fill a gap in terms of where these programs may not be used as often. Take another lens on that. You can look at the dollar amounts, right? So before we're looking at just number of investments, now we're looking at the dollars. And again, here, North Carolina is very much ahead of the game at almost $2.5 billion invested again over this 12-year period in North Carolina through a variety of rural business cooperative services programs. And again, that you can see even from the map, like folks, nobody else really is coming close to that in terms of North Carolina. So it does say, like, where there are other options for doing this kind of investment, and where, perhaps your organizations can help fill the gap in terms of access to capital. What we find for many, particularly for the rural business cooperative service programs, many of those are financing programs. And so many of those are not things where the business themselves can come directly to us. And we do have some programs like that, but many of them are financing programs. So they require intermediaries like you all to be available and be interested in these programs to help people get the access to capital that the federal government is facilitating. So also in the World Data Gateway, you can get a lot more narrow. So I showed you a state-by-state guide. You can also look in a number of different ways. I just pulled 3 states to just look at 3 different things, just so you can see some of the power here. So in this first example, you'll see guaranteed loans in Oklahoma for just the last 3 years by county, right? And so if you're in Oklahoma and you can see, and you have to look, I don't know all my counties in Oklahoma as much, but my guess is maybe some of them might be, maybe Tulsa or Oklahoma City, maybe some of the bigger places, I don't know. Some of you who, if you know Oklahoma, maybe you know this map better than I do, but you can see where they are. One caveat I would say around these though, is that while the project in all of these cases, or many of these cases, it has to be a rural community. The project has to be in a rural community. The lender does not have to be rural, right? So the lender may be located in an urban community, in which case that's the address that we have, and that's the address that would show up on the map. So if this is an urban community in this, large square county in the middle of Oklahoma, if that's a primarily urban community, that does not mean that those guaranteed loans are going there. It just means that's where the lender is. The guaranteed loan is in a rural community somewhere else. You could also do a search by congressional district. And I just showed New Mexico here. You can see the business awards in New Mexico, and those 3 congressional districts. You see you have a varying level of business awards from the Rural Business Cooperative Service awarded there. And then finally, you can see socially vulnerable communities, and you can see that definition on the website if you go there. But you can see places where there has been investment. Those are the dark communities, and places where there has not yet been investment in this 2022 to 2024 period, in this case in South Dakota. The other was New Mexico. I think I said that earlier. So I just wanted you to see what those options are, and you can drill down sort of program by program to see what how these programs are being used. Again, figure out, is there a gap? Is there a gap I can fill? Are there people maybe I can learn from, because there are folks who are doing this work already in that community. So we talk about I want you to say a word or two about eligibility. In general, we're looking at projects in cities with fewer than 50,000 people. As I said, lenders can be located anywhere, but the project needs to be in a rural community. There are sometimes some caveats around that. I mentioned that BNI, for example, has a carve out where you can do local food systems loans in urban communities with BNI, but everything else has to be rural. And sometimes for different programs, there may be some different requirements. In general, think about 50,000 people and below. You can do a specific search though, so you're not limited to that. And I put the websites there to search addresses, and so you can go in and just put in the address. If you put in an address and it says it's ineligible, but you are like, how can they say this is ineligible? This is a rural community. I know this place. I've seen it. I've been there. Maybe I live there. There are ways to appeal that and say that, and we would see all the time, or not say all the time, but frequently would see requests for reconsideration. So you can do that. What's called a string community. If the community is near an urban community, but is connected only by, I think it's a width of 2 census blocks, then it could be considered an urban area, because it's not as thoroughly integrated into that urban community, even though it is physically nearby. So there are ways to get around this that if they meet the guidelines. And so we just encourage you, if you put something in there and it says it's ineligible, but it just doesn't feel right to you because you know the place, ask, and they can evaluate that for you. So who do you ask, right? Who do you go to for all this? Rural Development and FSA, for those of you who may have attended the FSA conference before, are in a great situation in that we have field offices, right? Everything is not in DC. Everybody's not in DC. So there are 47 state offices for rural development across the country, 400 area offices. So lots of places for folks to go and talk directly with people who manage these programs. In those offices, those rural development offices, you'll find folks to represent all 3 of the rural development agencies: the Rural Housing Service, the Rural Utility Service, and the Rural Business Cooperative Service. And they can help you with implementation of any of these programs that you want to work with. So really, the state office, you say that when I was there, I would say the state office is the front door to rural development, and that really is the truth. I wanted to share some other resources as a close for folks that may have, you want to learn more. The department has an Office of Tribal Relations. You'll see Heather Dawn Thompson, who is the director, her email address, phone number, the website. They also published a 2023 report on investments in Indian country. And so if you want to download that and check that out, that's certainly a good thing to do as well. And then the rural development also has an Office of Tribal Relations. I apologize for missing the S on that. Ted Bulow is the Tribal Relations team lead. You see his phone number and his email address there, and the website is there as well. And so very much encourage you to engage with folks if you have questions, if you have concerns. The Rural Business Development Grant, RBDG, which used to be, some of you may remember RBOG and RBEG, those got combined many years ago into RBDG. There were some concerns around how that program was used and how accessible it was to tribal businesses in particular, and how business was defined and how conflict of interest was defined. And so there was a lot of concern that folks who should have had access to that program didn't know that they did. And so because folks reached out to us and said, this is a concern, this is a problem, this is what we see the issue, our team worked on that. One person in particular really worked hard on it. We made some changes to the rules and regs, the definitions, such that we had a number of tribal consultations as well, and then we're able to make some changes there. So folks do really want to be responsive. That was certainly my experience at USDA, and I believe that to still be the case. And just very much encourage you to reach out if you have questions or concerns or suggestions. And as I said, we're just open, to hold folks accountable. So I will close here in terms of my presentation. I'll stop sharing my screen and open it up in case there are more general questions that folks have or specific things folks have. Happy to talk through those. Anybody learn anything that was surprising to them today? Yeah, Rolina.
Yeah, just hearing the breadth of some of the products. Do you know if there's maybe like a spreadsheet of all of the RD programs? It would be super helpful, I think, for us to see, hey, which one are we eligible, as opposed to us going through and be like all excited about one and be like, oh no, we're not eligible. Shucks.
Yeah. So there are two documents. Let me see. I'm gonna see if I have it on my the resource guide. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly again. Wait, hold on. I missed you guys. Now I can't. Hold on. I had to. There we go. So anyway, in the document that y'all are going to get, when you get the slide deck, you will see. Okay, here I'm going to share it now because there's I think 2 resources that should be helpful. Okay, let me go up here. Here we go. Okay, so RD for tribes, tribal communities, and tribal families and communities, that has a lot of programs that are sorted by particular eligibility for those groups, and so that could be something that's very useful. There is also a rural development. I don't have it listed here in person, but if you go to the website, the resources website, this bottom one at the bottom where it says publications and resource guides, there's another resource there that talks about a variety of RD programs and lists them in a way that you can do it. There's also on the webpage rd.usda.gov. It's not quite a search engine, but it's a tool where you can say, like, I'm a lender, I'm a borrower, and it'll help you sort of find the programs that match the kinds of things you're trying to do. And similarly, that's how these other guides work, where they're more narrowly defined around a topic, right? So if you're thinking about rural energy efficiency, it's going to have a number of programs with all the details you need around rural energy efficiency, or workforce development, or higher education is a really good one as well. Lots of different programs there. If you're in higher education or work with folks in higher education, what are the options for them there? There are so many programs. Your question is a really good one. And it is just, it's challenging to navigate. And I'll say sometimes what happens is you do it and then it gets out of date. This local regional food systems guide, that one's relatively new. And so is fairly up to date, and it's also a good resource again for that particular topic. So lots of answers there, but yeah, no, absolutely,
super helpful. Thank you.
Good. And let's see. I think I see a question in the chat. Do you know how many see it? That's a great question. So, yeah. So there are. So I think when I came on, I asked this question about CDFI lenders, and there were like 7. Actually, that's not true. I asked the question about non-regulated lenders, and there were about 7 at that time. One of the things we did was a webinar to help non-regulated lenders, so particularly loan funds. That's what I mean when I say that. to help loan funds understand how they can engage with and become 1RD lenders. That webinar is linked in the resource guide that you'll get afterwards. So, feel free to take a look, watch that and see what's available. You can learn there. One of the things I think is, you think about CDFIs, part of the answer there depends on how you define it, right? So if you're thinking only about loan funds, there's not that many yet. And that's why, again, part of the reason I was so excited to do this, because I think there's a significant opportunity there. There are a number of CDFIs, banks and CDFI credit unions, though, of course, that participate in this program as well. So, there definitely are folks who have that community development mission and mindset, and could be good models or good partners, right? If you wanted to do a participation on a loan or those kinds of things, if you're thinking about maybe starting in that direction. Other questions? Melina, please.
If anyone else has questions too, please.
No, please, you're welcome.
But to piggyback off of what Harley was asking, because we're a smaller CDFI, and I know majority of the programs are like cooperative agreements with RD, and they're competitive. Is it something that you would recommend to smaller CDFIs, like those who have less than $3 million in their loan fund, to start exploring these things? Or do you think it's more geared for the $5 to $10 million loan funds?
So I would say first, I wouldn't assume, like, none of the programs I mentioned operate primarily through cooperative agreements. There are programs that do, but the ones I mentioned do not. So that's just one thing. And while the grant programs, like the REAP grants, for example, are the IRP program, it's not a grant program, but those are competitive programs. The other ones are not really, like the guaranteed loan programs are not really competitive in that sense. What they are is, there is a set of guidelines that is on that 1RD webpage, right? There's a set of guidelines for each of the programs. And if you meet that guidelines, your project meets those guidelines, your funder is an eligible funder, you're an eligible lender, and there's funding available, then you get the guarantee, right? So it's not competitive in that you're competing head to head with other applicants in that regard. So I just wanted to share that. I think the question is, your question though is a really valid one, right? Particularly around the guaranteed loans. And I'll talk about some of the other things in just a second. When I was at the CDFI that I worked at before I came to USDA, before I went to USDA, I heard folks say sometimes, that you have to get the guarantee and you have to keep the guarantee, right? So just because you get the guarantee, you need to make sure it's still available just in case something happens, right? Because if you don't have it because you haven't done, adhered by the regulations that the guarantee requires, then and something happens, then you're not able to get the funding back. You're not able to make that payment. And that's obviously not a situation that you want to be in. So I think, and that's why I mentioned participations and other kinds of ways that might be helpful to sort of dip your toe in the water a bit. One of the things you'll also see in the resource guide that you'll get after this is 2 organizations that are founded just to deal with folks, to support folks who do rural development guaranteed lending. And so, maybe it makes sense to visit their website to learn from them, or maybe even attend the conference and see how other folks are doing it. And if that's something that you want to dip your toe in. It is for smaller lenders, to be really specific, for smaller lenders like what you describe. I think it is, one would have to, I think, be really intentional and thoughtful about what kinds of work are required to actually to get and keep the guarantee, right? Do you have somebody who's going to get in the weeds? You have to get in the weeds, right? Get in the weeds on the rules and the regulations for how the program works. And it's not that it's necessarily hard. It's just you have to have somebody who's going to be dedicated to doing that and making sure that the guidelines are met, not just at the time when you're applying for and ideally receiving the guarantee, but over time, over the length of that loan, the life of that loan, so that, heaven forbid, there is an issue, you're in good shape and you can actually use that guarantee. So I think it is a bit of a commitment, but I think it's something, I guess the way I think about it is explore it and see, right? I think for sometimes it can be easy to just sort of say, that's not for me. But if that's done based on knowledge, then great. But I think ideally that is the way it's done, right? And so I think the other thing I would say too is, think about some of the other programs as well. Recognize that the guarantee programs don't have to be those big numbers, those maximums that I shared. Everybody doesn't get the maximum. Most of the loans are much smaller. More than half of the loans are much, much smaller less than $5 million. Many of those loans are, so that there may be something that you could use. That may be the toe that you dip in the water to help get you to some of those larger loans, if that's something that you're interested in doing. So I think it just depends on the strategy for the loan fund, what it is you're trying to do, what it is you're willing to commit to determine whether particularly guaranteed lending is a fit. Some of those other programs I think are a little bit more straightforward. I think that's why you see a lot more people using them so far. Hopefully that helps you think through that a bit. Other thoughts or other questions? Are there examples that you all have that are there projects that you can think of that you think might be a good fit? I'm not necessarily asking you to reveal your particular project, but are there kinds of areas where you're thinking like, I wonder if this could be an option for me? Like I think about REAP is one of those where I think there really is a lot of options that maybe sometimes folks don't fully think about it. They think about the renewable energy portion and may not realize the variety of different types of renewable energy that can be used. And oftentimes, particularly in the context, I think there was somebody who was a commercial lender who, may not think about all the different ways that REAP could be used for a small business, particularly in the context of energy efficiency improvements. So I mentioned REAP. I'll give you an example and then I'll answer the question, Holly. Thank you for that. So an example, I have an uncle who has a popcorn shop, and the popcorn shop's been around maybe 25 years, something like that. And he was telling me this is while I was still at USDA, but he was like, I think I need a new popcorn popping machine. It's like, because the old one, it's old and I feel like it's time to upgrade. And, part of my thought, and that's what I shared with him, I was like, if you're upgrading a 25-year-old popcorn machine, this new one is definitely going to be more energy efficient, right? And so that could be a REAP grant, right? I mean, I didn't delve into the details. It wasn't appropriate for me to do that given my role at that particular time. But I think it's really, there's such a wide variety of options there. And then I mentioned REAP, and I talked about to your question, Harley, I talked about the significant investment that was made in the grant portion of REAP through the Inflation Reduction Act. And, those dollars are being put to work, just trying to get those dollars out. That was one of the last things we were doing as I was coming out in January, was really putting those dollars to work for REAP. Part of what the nice thing about REAP, though, is that program has been around for a long time. It's not a new program. It's got a huge boost. It's got a lot of profile because there's so much money in there right now. But the program has been around for a while. So unless there are, intentional changes around that, then we would expect REAP to continue to be around. It just may not be funded at the same level. When I talk about the funding there, again, I'm speaking specifically of the grants, right? The loan program, as I mentioned, has a negative subsidy rate. And so those dollars it's in good shape there. There are environmental review and other kinds of things that make the process, you still have to go through the process and get the work done, but the dollars itself should not be a significant barrier in the context of REAP loans, because, folks have made really strong loans there, and there hasn't been significant defaults. So I see a question here about our comment about BNI. Yeah, the BNI program is great. So it really is. It can be used in so many different ways. That carve out for socially vulnerable communities can be very useful. We definitely have seen folks where maybe they're looking at 2 different projects or 2 different locations for a particular project, and they are able to choose the one that has that would qualify for the socially disadvantaged community designation, which means, as you saw in the fees slide, certain lower fees. It is a really great program. Used all the time. We would have, literally weekly meetings, sometimes multiple weekly meetings approving. And this was just at my level. It's not even talking about what's happening at the state level, because I just saw the larger loans at the national level. But weekly meetings, we were approving these loans. I mean, just so much volume and so much excitement about this program. The challenge, which I alluded to before, is that it doesn't have enough money, honestly, to meet the need. There just isn't enough dollars to meet the need. That's a big part of what those 2 organizations that you'll see in the document, a big part of what they do is, they do lobbying and those kinds of things to try to bring dollars to this program that as you've indicated, Brian, could be a really good fit, and is very, very popular. And so again, this is something where, again, I hope you'll consider that and look at it and just sort of see what might be possible. Again, if it's something where it's new to you, you're trying to learn, like maybe if it makes sense to do a participation, if you have a project and there's another lender you want to work with to sort of do that and learn from them doing that. Like there are ways to put that together that could be, really beneficial to you. Other comments, other questions, other programs, anything else that you found that was interesting or that you thought might or maybe surprising even, or that you want to share, anything that you felt like you're like, maybe this is something for me, but I know some other folks that I want to share this with. It's helpful to know what resonates with folks. I do encourage you as you're thinking about these programs as well to, if as your time and interest allows, to delve into that Rural Data Gateway and just see where the dollars are going. When they launched the site and I ended up spending way too much time on it because you have to be a little bit of a data nerd and kind of just dug around and did all kinds of things looking at where the dollars are going. And I think it's really, really useful to do it in a state that that you're familiar with, and you can see like, okay, I know what these communities on the western part of the state, for example, look like. I know what the communities are on the southern part of the state, and I would think that these communities could use the dollars, but are they going there? Are they not going there? And that can really help help you think about where there is a gap, where there's an opportunity for you to potentially fill that need, whether it's through a guaranteed loan program, one of these grant programs that you help connect people to it so that your lending with that borrower is even stronger because they have this grant funding. Whether it's thinking about other types of lending that you might do, whether it's through something like an IRP loan, where you would get that loan, that long-term, low-interest loan, 30-year loan, 1% interest, that you would then loan out and set up that revolving loan fund to others, or something like the MPILP, where those dollars are already sitting at an institution, ideally loaned out by now, getting paid back, and as they're thinking about those, I think it was 24, I can't remember what the number was. You saw it on the slide though. $275 million that's out there working now. As those dollars are getting repaid to those entities, they're looking for projects, right? They're looking for things across the entire middle of the food supply chain. If you have those projects, it may be helpful to go to those folks and say, like, you're in your state. I know you got this money. As it revolves back, let's talk. Let's figure out what might be possible with some of the projects that you may have that perhaps they don't know about, but be interested in as they try to continue to revolve those dollars around. Other thoughts, other questions? All right, Harley, is there anything more that you can think of or other things? If not, I'll just say, I'm happy to hang on as folks would like to do, so happy to, if there's other things you want to chat about afterwards, happy to do that. Again, I really, really appreciate the invitation to come talk with you all about this. I think it is, as I said, when I got to see these programs operate at the national level and I saw where the dollars went and I saw where they did not go, and particularly in places where I kind of knew a little bit about that state or that area and I saw that dollars maybe weren't going where I thought they ought to go. I also recognized the role of intermediaries in making sure those dollars are there, right? There were places where I definitely saw, I gave the example of shows you Oklahoma, and I'm not 100% sure what that county was that, there was two counties that had, it may have been Tulsa and Oklahoma City, I'm not sure. But I can do that in Arkansas because I know Arkansas a lot better. And so I can see where dollars are going. I can see where those intermediaries are, right? You can see where the intermediaries are because you see that's where the dollars are going. You all are those intermediaries. And so you're really well positioned to put these dollars to work in ways that are really going to make a sustainable difference. Ah, okay, Oklahoma, that would make sense. Yeah, Oklahoma State could certainly be using some of those dollars. Yep. Thank you. Yeah, so I think it can be really helpful to kind of delve into that and see that. And I just encourage you all to do that. I can say, I'm not suggesting that every program is a fit for everybody. As we talked about, Relina, when you asked your question, it is not. Every program is not a fit for every lender. But I do think, in the ideal world, all those would be informed decisions, right? You look at it, you analyze it, you say, okay, I understand this. This is not for us right now, maybe in 5 years. Or this is not for me, but I know who it is for. I'm going to forward this to them. Or maybe, you know what, this is for me. I'm so glad I found this, And so I do hope that this will encourage you to continue. I'm sure you already are doing that because you're here. Continue to make those kinds of informed decisions reach out to the resources, to the state offices. They love it when people come to see them and, have questions, have projects. They want to see those dollars in their states too, right? All these state offices have state executive directors, state directors. They want to see dollars come to their state. And so they're happy to work with you to try to bring those dollars to the state. So yeah, please do use those resource guides. There's really a lot of information out there. Don't let it overwhelm you because it is a lot. Again, related to your question, there's quite a bit out there. But some of those resource guides I think can be very helpful, particularly with some of the more targeted ones in finding programs and opportunities that might be really meaningful. So again, thank you all. Thanks so much to NAVS for the invitation. Harley, Sandy, I think she's off now, but she so very helpful. Janie, very helpful for the invitation. Thanks so much to each of you for your questions, your engagement, and thank you for the work that you're doing. And I wish you all the best with it.
Well, just thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us. I hope everybody learned lots. I really enjoyed that last comment of her hand hurting from taking so many notes. On that note, we will be sending out the PowerPoint presentation along with another document that has more information in it, plus the recording of today's webinar. And that will probably be coming out, I would guess, tomorrow. So definitely be looking at that. It'll be coming from Miss Sandy, of course. And as always, if you have any other questions that you think of afterwards, just email me or Miss Sandy and we will get answers back to you or connect you with the right people. So thank you so much for your time today. And I hope that everybody has a great rest of your day.